You know, as I'm sitting here thinking about how to write this script, I realized that recently all the manga that I have been reading have been very repetitive. And that's not to say that they're not entertaining or not interesting, but there's only so much I can read without starting to see the patterns and logic in the progression. So, that naturally made me think, what makes a good manga? But that's not exactly an easy question to answer, since no matter where you go, you'll find some weird, non-coherent answer that doesn't really align with anything else. So that made me think, what makes a manga popular? You see, there's a reason that manga like Chainsaw Man, Jujutsu Kaisen, and One Punch Man are so popular. Mainly, it's because they make you go, what the fuck? You see, manga that manage to create a world unbeknownst to the reader and pull them in with the story stand out from the rest, and it's precisely this idea that made me want to make this video in the first place. So, I'm going to channel my last bit of brain cells left to bring you guys a few unusual manga that I managed to scrounge up. Now, I'm sure most of you have at least heard of Dorohedoro by Q Hayashida, but you might have not known that she has a new work. It's called Die Dark, which roughly translates to Big Dark in English. And this story really keeps in touch with Hayashida's love for the fucking wacky. I mean, the story premise is legit about a dude, Zahasenko, and his anthropomorphic skeleton backpack that travel through space because for some reason, there is a rumor that Zahasenko's bones will grant any wish. So now Zahasenko's life mission is to find whoever has spread this rumor about him and is causing everyone in the universe to want his bones. I mean, alright, weird, but I can get behind it, right? But the story doesn't end there. There are two worlds in this world, the normal realm and the dark realm. But only dark beings are able to access the dark realm by passing through a black hole. If a regular being were to pass through this hole, however, they would be broken apart, put back together, and then turned inside out, according to Senko and also the poor old man. They will be turned into a shadow, a mutated version of their past self that's come about as a result of their inability to withstand the black hole. Oh yeah, and I completely forgot to mention, like, the currency in this dark realm, right, is bones. Human bones. And, you know, you might ask, how do you get these bones? Well, of course, you skin people using your trusty bone axe that's made of shadow energy, because why the fuck not? Or like how there's a giant IKEA that you can ride around on a giant 4-roach wheeler with a maximum allowed time for shopping being 12 hours, or else the entire fucking asteroid shop explodes. Like, the stark contrast between the utter brutality of the world and the happy-go-lucky attitudes of the characters really make this story go beyond the regular dark sci-fi horror. It's the type of story that made me giggle like a little girl because a dog robot controls a spaceship with a cord that hangs out of its ass. I love it. It's nonsense made sensible. It's just the way the story manages to convey that in technicality, Zahasenko is a villain, at least according to the weird Shadow Council, but also show that in everything he is actually the victim is masterfully executed. I end up forgetting quite easily that the man skins people for fun because of how unseriously the story takes itself, and honestly, that's its charm. Now, this one is something that I never thought I would actually read, but lo and behold, we're here. It's called Rooster Fighter. And before all the furry allegations are thrown at me, I want to say that just because one of the first few panels has chicken sex doesn't mean the story is without class. I mean, Mr. Cock is a man, or rather a chicken of class. This manga is legit a picture-perfect, stereotypical fighting manga with a main character that's a chicken. Like, I really don't know how else to explain it. Like, the story revolves around Mr. Cock and his quest in order to find the demon that ate his sister. As such, Mr. Cock faces many challenges along the road, such as demons, children, women, and water. Like, there isn't much to it in terms of story, but it's just one of those things that grabs your attention and you can't look away, similarly to a horrific traffic accident. And I mean, all in all, it's just definitely a breath of fresh air, and the fact that the main characters are all chickens just make it all the better. Now, imagine in between a towering building that houses many important guests in its restaurants, and a public park that houses a village for the homeless, there sits a man in his car, situated perfectly in between, yet belonging to neither. That man is our protagonist, 34-year-old Susumi Nakoshi. He's a man stuck in purgatory, having lost his meaning in life. The story is called Humulus, and it follows Nakoshi, who is introduced to us as a man of many contradictions. He's a compulsive liar that does not want to associate with the homeless. He eats with them, sits with them, and also shares the cold with them, yet at the same time he would go as far as to throw up the food offered to him by them in order to not associate himself with them. He has an obsession with his car to the point where you could describe the relationship he has with it as an Oedipus complex. When one night Nakoshi goes for one of his nightly drives, he notices that he has run out of gas money. In such a moment, a conspicuously dressed man approaches him with an offer. to drill a hole in his head and see if he develops psychic powers in exchange for money. Nakoshi naturally rejects this idea, only to notice that his car was towed the following morning by the very same person who offered him the money. Now fast forward to after the procedure, Nakoshi undergoes tests in order to see if he has a talent for the supernatural, which all seem to be fruitless until one night Nakoshi notices how the people around him have become twisted and distorted. It is here where Nakoshi's story truly begins, as he has gained the ability to see the true nature of people. By using his newfound powers, Nakoshi starts looking into people, but through this, he slowly loses sight of himself. I read Humulus a few years back, and whilst thinking about weird manga to make this video, and one of the first stories that came to mind was this one. Because I mean, simply put, this manga is just depraved. But even with that depravity, there's something that sticks out. The story explores the idea of belonging in such a way that makes you initially hate and detest Nakoshi for acting the way he does. But honestly, I can't seem to hate this story. It's so well executed that it throws me into an existential crisis. I think that Nakoshi was designed specifically for the purpose of showcasing the extent to which people are willing to go to find belonging. That the story is a form of explanation in which we are not meant to like the protagonist because, at least to some extent, we can relate to him. In a world that is so focused on finding your place, but also so indifferent to individual suffering, we can see a part of ourselves in Nakoshi, who is struggling to find a place that he can belong to. In addition, a large portion of the story is left to interpretation, and honestly that's what makes the story so great. To derive lessons present, but not explicitly stated, is something that I've always appreciated in stories, and I think it's also why I love this story. Now, I'm not sure if you've heard of Sakamoto Days, but personally I've seen this story circulate within the manga community for some time now, as part of the new advent of the new shonen manga. And frankly, I can see why. I mean, who doesn't want to see a fat John Wick pummeling 100 dudes in an aisle of a 7-Eleven? It's like the perfect mixture of something like Mashal and its over-the-top, overpowered characters with a good portion of pre-diabetic John Wick. Now, honestly, the story starts off strong, but just keeps on getting more and more wacky. Like, yeah, let's have an amusement park date with your wife and child, whilst avoiding 100 assassins sent after you, and oh, and you were actually friends with one of the assassins before? Wait, what the fuck? You're hot? Never mind, he's back. Honestly, the entire insanity of the plot just makes the story enjoyable. The wackiness is done in a manner that makes the story entertaining one panel to the next. It's probably one of the most memorable and well executed recently created shonen manga, and honestly for a good reason. Like, I've never seen somebody lose appendages with such a lack of emotion, and that's precisely what makes this story so good. It's the perfect balance of action, a world that makes no physical sense, and just enough logic to keep you in the loop as a perfect remedy to a brain that has less attention span than that of a Neolithic hunter-gatherer. Yes, I'm referring to you. You know, I find it really hard to describe these manga in any way without saying the words what, the, and fuck in whichever order every few minutes, but I think that just justifies the idea for this video. Like, I mean, the entire goal behind making this was one, that I wanted to make something different from what I've made before. Freshen up my content, if you will. And two, I really wanted to push my boundaries, as I tend to get too comfortable in both everyday life and in my manga reading. This was basically an excuse to read a bit more of something different, and frankly, I think this was a good thing. Exposing myself to new content makes me realize why I fell in love with the medium in the first place. Its expressiveness and ability to make you question through dialogue and pictures is something that I haven't been able to find anywhere else. And more so than any other manga that I've read on this list, I must tell you that the one that made me go into a catatonic state more times than I can count has been Jagon. Now, if you have been lucky and or unlucky to have never come across this gem of a story, let me provide you with a brief comparison. Just imagine Dandadan, right? The story's fucking wacky. Now, take out all the comedy and over-the-top parts and include monsters, great art, and also just a lot of sex and depravation. Like, I can't even show you some panels because there's just guys either ripping the skin from the stem or girls with their kahungas out. Now, that's not to say that the story's bad. No, not even close. I mean, the opening scene in the story is literally the main character imagining killing a bunch of hooligans with his gun. But honestly, that isn't even the weird part. Like, here's some snippets for you. The main character's favorite mascot is an eggplant that murders everyone in cold blood. There's an owl that eats alien frogs, and then a scary scorpion girlfriend that the main character then keeps in his fridge, or at least her head. And that's just the first 10 chapters, and honestly there's not a single thing that I would change about this story. Our main character is someone who hates his life, living one devoid of meaning and living day to day out of necessity. However, one day, frogs fall from the sky, because plotline, and people started to turn into hideous creatures that stem from their desires. Our main character is one of these creatures, or at least he's turning into one. Because the frog within him is not fully developed, he gains the powers that stem from his desire of shooting people. But in turn, by using that power, he accelerates the growth of the creature within him. So what's the only way to slow the progression? Well, of course it's to snort the bird pellet made by the owl after it eats the frog. Yeah. So when our borderline bird pellet sniffing addict's girlfriend turns into one of these creatures and he is forced to kill her, he finds out from the owl that if he captures all the frogs and then kills himself, the owl will be able to reconstruct him, basically giving him a new life. So what happens? Well, as any other main character, our super morally questionable protagonist decides that now is the time to change and that he wants to give up his second chance at life for the sake of the girlfriend that he just snorted up earlier. Now, honestly, looking beyond the undoubtedly questionable plotline, the story is gorgeous. Not only visually, but plot-wise. Similar to Humulus, the story takes on a weird twist on exploring the idea and meaning behind life. Beyond the action and depravity, there lies a larger issue at hand. The epidemic of living life how we are supposed to versus how we want to. And honestly, Jagon is a beautiful implementation of this idea. By showing you the extremes present in those who repress themselves due to expectations and norms, we can start to see our own dissatisfactions with our life. And frankly, that's what I love about the story. I mean, sure, you can always talk about the art and the sheer wackiness of the plot, but I feel that it leaves more than just excitement and anxiety. Being able to learn to view your life from an outside perspective and find passion to live again is what the story does so well. And more than anything, this story just knows how to make you uncomfortable.